At 41, Daniel Carter began noticing something unsettling. It was not a crisis. It was quieter than that. One by one, the people around him seemed to be moving into the next chapter of life. New houses, children, careers expanding. Meanwhile, Daniel's life felt strangely suspended. Not broken, not failing, just out of sync. At first, the feeling was easy to ignore, until a small moment at work made it harder. The moment happened during a Monday morning meeting. Daniel sat at the long conference table with his team. The conversation revolved around quarterly numbers and operational targets. Nothing unusual. He had attended hundreds of meetings just like this. But halfway through the discussion, something caught his attention. A younger colleague stood near the screen presenting a logistics optimization plan. The man spoke with calm confidence. Clear structure, clear thinking. And Daniel suddenly noticed something. This colleague was almost 10 years younger, yet his career seemed to be accelerating. Leadership had already started treating him as someone with future potential. Daniel sat quietly while the presentation continued. He felt a slight tightening in his chest. It was not anger. It was not resentment. It was something quieter, a quiet awareness. For the first time in years, he wondered if the professional momentum he once expected had slowly faded without him noticing. The meeting ended. Chairs slid against the floor. People stood up. Conversations restarted. Daniel gathered his notes and walked back to his office. From the outside, nothing about the day had changed, but a thought had appeared and refused to leave. Is this where my career stays now? The question followed him longer than he expected. Later that evening, Daniel returned to his apartment. The hallway lights flickered slightly as he unlocked the door. Inside, the apartment looked exactly the same as it always did. Orderly, quiet, predictable. He set his keys on the kitchen counter. The small metallic sound echoed in the room. He opened the refrigerator, stared for a moment, and closed it again. He was not hungry. He was just tired. Daniel sat on the couch and leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. The silence in the apartment felt heavier than usual. 2 years earlier, when his marriage ended, he told himself the solitude would only be temporary. Life would reorganize itself. New routines, new relationships, a new direction. But time had passed more quickly than he expected, and the direction still felt unclear. That night he opened his phone, not because he needed anything, just habit. He scrolled through social media. Photos appeared one after another. A college friend standing beside a newly purchased house. Another friend holding a newborn child. A former coworker celebrating a major promotion. Daniel did not feel jealousy in the obvious sense. He was genuinely happy for them. But beneath that feeling, something else quietly formed. Comparison, not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet calculation. Everyone else seems to be advancing through the expected stages. Marriage, children, career growth, financial expansion. Meanwhile, his own life looked different. A stable job, a quiet apartment, and a social circle that had slowly grown smaller over the years. The comparison did not appear in dramatic moments. It appeared in quiet ones, while brushing his teeth at night, while driving home from work, while sitting alone on a Sunday afternoon. And slowly, without announcing themselves, two fears began forming underneath those thoughts. The first was the fear of irrelevance. Daniel had always believed stability would naturally lead somewhere. That consistency would eventually turn into progress. But a question had started forming. What if stability simply meant standing still? The second fear was harder to name. The fear of being replaceable. At work, new employees arrived every year. Talented, ambitious, fast learners. Daniel sometimes wondered how long it would take before the company began seeing him differently. Not as someone shaping the future, but as someone simply maintaining the present. These thoughts were not dramatic. They were quiet. But quiet thoughts repeat themselves, especially in silence. And over time, repetition makes them harder to ignore. There is a reason this experience hits men in a particular way. Many men build identity around a role, not just the job they perform, but the meaning attached to it. Provider, builder, problem solver. From a young age, men absorb an unspoken rule. Your value is measured through usefulness, through contribution, through progress. When life moves forward, this identity feels stable. Promotions arrive, responsibilities increase, families grow. But when progress slows, something subtle begins to shift. The question is no longer about work. The question becomes something deeper. Who am I becoming? Most men never ask that question directly. Instead, they continue performing the same routines. Work, responsibilities, daily obligations. From the outside, everything looks normal. But internally, a quiet uncertainty begins expanding. Another layer makes this even harder. Men are often expected to remain emotionally controlled. Stability is interpreted as silence. Handle your problems privately. Remain composed. Do not burden others. Over time, this creates a strange paradox. Men carry enormous psychological pressure, but rarely create space to examine it. So the pressure does not explode. It slowly erodes. Confidence becomes less certain. Direction becomes less clear. And comparison quietly fills the space where clarity once existed. Daniel had never consciously framed his life this way, but the pattern was there. His sense of worth had been tied to forward movement. And when that movement slowed, the identity attached to it began to weaken. But there is something important most people miss. The way we measure progress is deeply flawed. Most timelines are invented after the fact. They only appear logical from the outside. What looks like success from a distance often hides confusion. And what feels like delay from the inside may simply be a different path unfolding. Daniel did not experience a dramatic turning point. There was no sudden breakthrough. The shift began quietly. One morning in his car, he had arrived early at work. The engine was off. The parking lot was still mostly empty. Daniel sat there without moving. He watched employees gradually arrive. Some walked quickly. Others carried coffee cups while checking their phones. Everyone seemed to be moving somewhere. For a moment, he simply observed. Then a quiet thought appeared. Who decided what the correct timeline looks like? The question surprised him, because he had never questioned it before. Marriage by a certain age, career growth by a certain age, financial milestones by a certain age. But where did those expectations actually come from? Friends, culture, social observation. The realization felt uncomfortable, because if the timeline was not universal, then the comparison he had been making for years might not mean much at all. Daniel did not immediately feel relief. He felt resistance. Part of him wanted the timeline to be real, because certainty feels safer than ambiguity. But the question remained, and over the next few weeks, it kept returning quietly. Without forcing answers, Daniel began making small adjustments. Nothing dramatic, nothing visible from the outside. He started waking up slightly earlier, just enough to create a calm hour before work. He made coffee, sat near the window, and allowed himself time to think without distraction. Sometimes he read. Sometimes he simply watched his thoughts pass by. He also returned to physical exercise. Nothing extreme. 3 mornings a week at a small neighborhood gym. The routine was simple. Movement, breathing, structure. And something interesting happened. Physical consistency created mental stability. At work, Daniel made another small shift. Instead of focusing on promotions that might or might not happen, he focused on improving the systems under his responsibility. Better documentation, more efficient reporting, small operational improvements, no announcements, no expectation of recognition, just quiet responsibility. Gradually, something subtle changed. Daniel stopped measuring progress through comparison. He began measuring it through alignment. Was he showing up consistently? Was he improving what he could control? Was he maintaining self-respect in how he lived? Those questions created a different kind of momentum. one that did not depend on external timelines. Life rarely unfolds in synchronized stages. Some people build families early. Others discover their direction later. Some careers accelerate quickly. Others grow slowly over time. The mistake is assuming every path must follow the same sequence. Time does not reward speed alone. It rewards participation. A man maintains his value by remaining engaged with his life, by continuing to build, by continuing to refine his character and direction. Self-respect grows through consistent responsibility, not through comparison. And sometimes the quiet seasons of life are not signs of delay. They are periods of recalibration. If parts of Daniel's story feel familiar, pause for a moment. Notice something simple. Where you are today is only one point within a much longer timeline. Instead of measuring your life against someone else's milestones, ask a different question. Are you still participating in your own life with honesty and responsibility? If the answer is yes, then the path is still unfolding. And sometimes that is more than enough.